Hello, my name's Martin Keithy. I've been vicar here at St Chad's Church for some 25 years. I always think that's a long time, but then I remember that there have been vicars here for over 900 years. And it's that sense of history that I think is important to me and to lots of people associated with the church. To think that this church has stood here from shortly after the Norman conquest in the 12th century when the first vicar is listed, through all the Reformation and the changes to the church and the foundation of the Church of England, through to more recent events and the Second World War. Something of that rich history is on display for you today and the ways in which the church has changed and developed through the years. We hope you enjoy your visit.
The parish church of St Chad's stands at the heart of the historic market town of Poulton-le-Fylde. Christian worship has been offered continuously on this site for close to 1,000 years, possibly longer. The earliest written record of a church in Poulton comes from 1094. Roger de Poitou made a grant, establishing St Mary's Priory in Lancaster, which in turn allowed the priory to appoint clergy to serve 9 churches, including Poulton. The church is dedicated to St Chad, a Northumbrian missionary monk of the 7th century, suggesting a place of worship may have been here in Anglo-Saxon times, before the Norman invasion. Chad is described in Bede's Ecclesiastical History of the English Nation as a person of humility, who was filled with the fear of the Lord. The medieval history of St Chad's was far from easy. Several calamities befell the church in the 14th century, including the imprisonment of the prior over a land dispute, the invasion of the area by the Scots, followed by the Black Death, to which the vicar of Poulton succumbed. The Reformation also brought considerable upheaval. Queen Elizabeth I granted the Fleetwood family the right to appoint the vicars of Poulton. This patronage, as it is called, later passed to the Heskeths, a family joined through marriage to the Fleetwoods, and eventually, in 1934, to the then newly formed Blackburn Diocese. References to the Fleetwood and Hesketh families can be seen around St Chad's, including several diamond-shaped hatchments upstairs. These hatchments are memorials to members of the family who died in the 19th century. Most of the present building dates from 1751, and replaces the previous medieval church, which was in a state of near collapse. The tower is somewhat older and goes back to around 1638 and the reign of Charles I. We will make our way around the church, beginning at the doorway where you came in. To your left is the choir vestry, formed from an elaborately carved oak screen. This screen is all that is left of the private pew owned by the Fleetwood Hesketh family, which used to be where the choir stalls are now situated. Other box pews can be seen upstairs, each with its own nameplate. The renting of pews was brought to an end in 1914. The windows around the church are mostly plain glass. Those with stained glass are worth a closer look. A window by the Georgian staircase to the rear of the church depicts the bread and wine of Holy Communion. This window was originally behind the altar. Going down the aisle towards the choir stalls, we find the baptismal font. Moved to this position in 2001, it dates from 1932. There have been several previous fonts. The base of a much older one can be seen outside against the base of the tower, close to a stone dated 1693. Close to the font, on the baptistry wall, there is a plaque dedicated to the memory of Joseph and Richard Wilding from Skippel, who perished at sea in 1828, a reminder of Poulton's seafaring past. In front of the choir stall stands the lectern. Made from brass, it dates from 1948. The scriptures are read here week by week. The eagle is the traditional symbol of St John's Gospel and reminds us that God's life-giving word spreads far and wide. Beyond the choir stalls, you can see a royal coat of arms. These belonged to George III and was put on display to show the church's loyalty to the crown. The brass chandelier above the communion table dates from 1710. Notice the dove holding an olive branch, reminding us of the story of the flood and Noah's Ark. The altar originally stood against the east wall of the church, but a semicircular apse was added in 1868, paid for by the then vicar, the Reverend Thomas Clark. Sadly, he died before its completion. The present altar was gifted to the church in 1912. The carved oak reredos, panelling and sanctuary windows were added in the 1930s. The reredos depicts, from left to right, the Annunciation to Mary, St. Chad, the Supper at Emmaus, St. Hilda of Whitby, and Christ's Resurrection. The present organ was installed in 1912. Its rich sounds still accompany the congregation and choir as they lift their voices in praise to God week by week. It cost £500, around £75,000 in today's value. The pulpit was constructed in 1955 and is made from the panels of an earlier 18th century Jacobean pulpit. The inscription on it comes from the prophet Isaiah, but one panel is now missing. The full wording calls on the preacher to give of his or her best. Cry aloud, spare not, lift up thy voice like a trumpet. Near the pulpit is a smaller communion table, and in front of that, a place where anyone can light a candle as they offer their personal prayers to God. The church is open for visitors and for private prayer most morning and afternoons throughout the week. As well as all there is to explore inside, there is more to see outside. In spring, the churchyard is awash with crocuses, and in November it is decorated with poppies for remembrance. In the south-east corner of the church, by the door to the clergy vestry, is the pirate's grave. Now badly worn, it includes a skull and crossbones. The grave belongs to Edward Sherdley, who died in 1741 and who, despite Poulton's history of smuggling, was never a pirate. The symbols are simply an undertaker's reminder of our mortality. Close by is a door to the Fleetwood family vault. Over the door is a Latin inscription, Insignia Ricci Fleetwood Aniquius Ecclesia Patronis Anno Domini 1699. The arms of Richard Fleetwood, patron of this church, the year of our Lord, 1699. To the left of where you came in is the bell tower. It has its own entrance. The tower houses 8 bells, which are still enthusiastically rung by our bell ringers as a call to worship. At the top of the tower is a rather handsome weather vane. The ship has its sails furled to show that Poulton is no longer a port. Ships no longer sail here, and smuggling no longer takes place. St. Chad's welcomes people from far and wide. Some come for Sundays or weekday services, others for a wedding, christening or funeral, and still others just to enjoy the quiet, light a candle or say a prayer. More information about what the church has to offer is found on our Facebook page, which is regularly updated. Thank you for watching.